So, dear colleagues, we shall continue our working day and we give floor to the Principal Deputy Chief Monitor, Mr. Alexander Hook.
Dear friends, as you are all doubt aware of, last week was one of the worst Eastern Ukraine has had in a long time. For us in the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, the escalation came as no surprise. In our daily reports in the weeks preceding the flare-up, we had been reporting on the proximity of the sites and the presence of heavy weapons in the area. These are the basic risk factors threatening the ceasefire. Here in this graph that you see, you can see what the escalation looks like in a long-term context, going back to the beginning of 2016. As you can see, we had some flare-ups over the past 13 months, but nothing like what happened last week. The numbers are staggering. Last week, the number of ceasefire violations recorded by the SMM almost tripled. The number of explosions caused by Minsk-proscribed weapons, namely mortars, tanks and artillery, saw a six-fold increase. Of those explosions caused by Minsk-proscribed weapons, over 30% were caused by multiple launch rocket systems. I emphasize the multiple launch rocket systems because such weapons are particularly indiscriminate. Civilian casualties are inevitable. And indeed, we have confirmed many civilian casualties, 38 so far, 8 of them fatalities. Dear friends, thankfully, in recent days we have seen a considerable drop in violence. Here on the next slide, you can see the first 3 days of this week compared to the previous 5 weeks. In broad terms, we have returned to the normal abnormal. We should not, however, assume that such a horrific outburst of violence is not possible again. If we are to avoid its repetition, we must learn from it. There are indeed a number of lessons to be drawn from last week's escalation. Firstly, violence is more likely when the sites are in close proximity. What struck me last week in Yasinovata was how close the sites are positioned together. They can literally see another and shoot at one another using small arms. This inevitably leads to escalation as one shot is answered with 2, followed by a mortar, until eventually each side is employing multiple launch rocket system in a frenzy of strikes and counter-strikes like we saw last week. Where the sides have disengaged, we know there is less violence. Last week saw violence all across the contact line, but in the 2 areas where we have observed partial disengagement, namely Zolote and Petrivske, it was relatively calm. Another lesson we should draw is that so long as weapons are readily available, they will be used. The sides tell us that they have honored their commitments in the Minsk agreements. They say they have withdrawn proscribed weapons from the security zone. This is clearly not the case. All along the contact line, on both sides, our monitors saw these weapons. Last week alone, we saw at least 106 proscribed weapons, including multiple launch rocket systems, in violation of their respective withdrawal lines. Dear friends, facts are facts. Perhaps this is the most important lesson last week. The sides must face up to these facts. Fact number 1. Each side has weapons in violation of the agreed withdrawal lines. Fact number 2. Each side has used and continues to use these weapons. Fact number 3. Each side has been responsible for the maiming and killing of civilians. Fact number 4. Only the sides can withdraw the weapons. Only the sides can stop firing the weapons. Only the sides can stop injuring and killing civilians. Dear friends, last week was a week I never want to see repeated. Least of all for the civilians who bore the brunt of the violence there. But there are some positive lessons to be learned from it. In the middle of all this madness, I finally saw the sides take small steps towards recognizing reality. Recognizing that fighting in and around the Donetsk filtration station threatened to unleash a humanitarian and even ecological disaster, the sides took steps to avert it. With the assistance of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, in coordination with the Joint Center for Control and Coordination, they stopped fighting around the station. Long enough, at least, to allow repair crews to go in. Those crews, with our monitors present, restored electricity to around 22,000 people in Avdiivka. Restoration of the electrical supply to the filtration station also guaranteed drinking water to up to 400,000 people on both sides of the contact line. This potentially has wider implications. It shows that the Joint Center for Control and Coordination can work constructively and jointly. It shows that the ceasefire that the sides agreed to over 2 years ago can be managed. It can be facilitated. It is not dead. There is still hope that the sides, with help, can stop violence. Dear friends, the SMM has been instrumental in facilitating localized adherence to the ceasefire in and around the water filtration station. Like with the repair crews and the Joint Center for Control and Coordination, our monitors showed extraordinary courage. A word of caution, however. We, along with the generals of the Joint Center for Control and Coordination, the repair crews and staff of the water filtration station, have effectively been dealing with symptoms only. Underlying root causes remain. So long as weapons remain in the security zone, and so long as the sides continue to move forward, placing armed forces and formation in close proximity, this will happen again. Unless the root causes are treated, this limited success is doomed to be short-lived. A single stray 82mm mortar is enough to cut electricity again, or enough to start yet again another major escalation. There has been some recognition of this reality. On 1st February, the Trilateral Contact Group issued a joint statement committing to the withdrawal of weapons from the Donetsk airport, Avdiivka and the Yasinovata area. The sites have not, however, provided the SMM with updated baseline information on numbers of weapons to be withdrawn or the location of positions to be vacated. This afternoon, I return to Donetsk and Luhansk regions, where I hope such information will be provided. Once received, the SMM will be in a position to verify what the sites have promised to do. Dear friends, we in the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, and I hope the Joint Center for Control and Coordination, stand ready and able to assist in ensuring weapons are withdrawn and that the sites disengage. They must do it now. As usual, at the end of my statement, I would like to inform you about the latest mission numbers. As of today, the mission has 722 monitors, of whom 603 are deployed in the east. In addition, there are 331 Ukrainian colleagues and 93 other international staff working for the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. We have some questions. The first one will be in Ukrainian, so please.
112 channel, please can you comment what the SMM could do to avoid a new escalation, a new flare-up? And another question, you have mentioned that the strategic infrastructure should be protected from firing. How could this be achieved?
A very important question. The Special Monitoring Mission has the task to document the situation on the ground. The fact is that the sites stand far too close in many areas of the contact line. And the fact is that heavy weapons, tanks, mortar, artillery, multiple launch rocket systems are in the security zone where they should not be on both sides. Now, we have made this public, and you can read our reports, it's all there, clearly documented. It is now up to the sides to move these weapons back and to create a distance between the positions so that tension's been reduced. We have been traveling forward and back between Kiev and Donbass and Kiev. We have teams on both sides and we facilitate dialogue so that the sides have an opportunity to build trust so that it becomes possible that weapons are withdrawn and positions are not coming closer to one another. But it's up to the Ukrainian armed forces and to the so-called DPR and so-called LPR and the signatories of the Minsk agreements to ensure that these weapons are being withdrawn. It's a task of the SMM to document whether this is happening or not. Now, civilian infrastructure, you're absolutely right, often are placed in the middle of it. The Donetsk water filtration station, electrical grid, major water pipelines supporting both sides from north to south are situated in the middle of that contact line. And virtually the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces and of the other side are on top of this infrastructure. So if the fighting begins between those positions very close to one another, you can count one and one together, the infrastructure will be affected. So to protect it, positions must not come closer, they must go the other way. And heavy weapons that have the reach to hit infrastructure must be pulled back. And the pullback of weapons have already been agreed a long time ago. If the sites provide us with the position of these weapons, we can verify, we can document whether they actually moved the weapons back or not. And if they don't provide it to us, we can monitor only whether weapons are still there. But in order to build trust, we would need to get fresh inventories of the weapons on both sides of the line, so we can document that if they've been pulled back, we can publicly state in our reports that weapons have been pulled back, and that will help to build trust. Once again, it is the task of the sides to pull back weapons, and it's the task of the SMM to keep channels open between the sides of the contact line and to document whether the sides do what they have committed to do.
Next question.
Radio Svoboda. The question about Crimea. Do you have any kind of external observation in Crimea? Do you have any patrolling over there? Дякую. Спеціальна моніторингова місія ОБСЄ в Україні. Немає працівників в Криму. Найближча наша команда перебуває на Херсонщині. І ми здійснюємо моніторинг уздовж адміністративної межі. І всі спостереження, вони включаються у наші щоденні звіти, які ми публікуємо на нашому веб-сайті. Crimea news. Yesterday, Russian Foreign Affairs Minister Mr. Lavrov, quoting the OSCE SMM, confirmed in its report that the Kiev site is guilty for the recent flare-up and escalation, and reportedly it is reflected in your reports. Can you comment on that, whether it's true or not?
The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission does not point fingers at any side. The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission does not point finger at anyone. We establish and report facts on the ground, and these facts are available to everyone publicly on our website in Russian, Ukrainian, and English language every day. And it's up to the readers of our reports to draw conclusions, and it's their conclusions, and it's not the SMM's conclusions.
One more question.
Clarification about this situation in Avdiivka. In the internet there was a video that militants were using MLRS grad in Avdiivka. Have you recorded the use of MLRS?
Yes, indeed, we have both recorded the use of MLRS on both sides, as well as the positioning of MLRS in the security zone where they shouldn't be on both sides. And I have to emphasize once again, the use of MLRS is the most indiscriminate weapon that they use, and civilians often get hurt and injured and killed through the usage of this specific type of weapon. These weapons should be pulled back far behind withdrawal lines, and once the SMM receives baseline information from the site, we will be able to verify whether these weapons have indeed been pulled back or not.
Колеги, чи є ще запитання? У вас є запитання?
Да.
The last question.
Last week, a representative also called LPR distributed the information that reportedly, under the cover of OSCE branded vehicles and OSCE staff on the occupied territories, they are launching the special operations by SBU. They have claimed that they addressed you to reflect on that, whether the OSCE SMM recorded such kind of provocative actions.
We are aware of these reports, and should we establish facts and monitor anything that would confirm this, it would be made public immediately, and we would be following it up with those that keep control on the area where these observations would have been made.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Looking forward to seeing you here next week.
Okay, thank you.